Here we go.
100 people in the entire world are affected by spinocerebellar ataxia type 36. My dad is one of those people. Spinocerebellar ataxia type 36 is a neurological condition in which the cells in your cerebellum in your brain progressively deteriorate. For my dad, that means that his speech is slurred and his balance and coordination are severely impacted. He uses a motorized scooter to travel long distances since it's unsafe for him to walk without assistance. My dad almost did not attend my high school graduation. This wasn't because he didn't want to, it was because of the lack of handicap accessible seating and parking arrangements at my graduation venue. Thankfully, my mom was able to find handicap accessible seating arrangements for my dad and her after lots of pushback from the event coordinators. My dad is just one of millions of handicapped individuals across the world that have to deal with obstacles like this on a daily basis. Infrastructural barriers and stigmas, as well as lack of social awareness for the disabled community, are challenges that often get swept under the rug. My goal is to raise awareness about these barriers and present some solutions to help reduce the roadblocks that the disabled community faces, starting with Pepperdine campus. Pepperdine is in urgent need of more easily accessible routes and transportation options for the disabled community. As we all know, the hilly location of Pepperdine elicits multi-flight staircases, and ramps and elevators are scarce and not clearly marked. As an able-bodied cross-country runner who gets wounded going up these stairs, I often wonder how the disabled community of Pepperdine is able to navigate through campus. So, what is a disability? The World Health Organization states that a disability results from the interaction between a person with a health condition with their personal and environmental factors. Physical disabilities can hinder a student's ability to travel between classes efficiently. The passage of the ADA, or Americans with Disabilities Act, in 1990 prohibited discrimination against disabled people in America and required certain measures to be put into place to help them reduce barriers. However, despite these advances, many barriers still arise. The ADA states that businesses must offer reasonable accommodations to disabled people in public places. However, this term reasonable is not very specific, and a lot of the times these accommodations are not adequate. Barriers are not just limited to physical obstacles. According to the CDC.org, barriers include physical environment that is not accessible, lack of relevant assistive technology, negative attitudes towards people with disabilities, and services, systems, and policies that are either non-existent or that hinder a disabled person's ability to function in daily life. Clearly, there's no way for a disabled person to climb multiple flights of stairs, but there are steps that we can take to make campus more accessible. Through implementing better transportation options for the physically disabled community, we can improve the accessibility on campus. Allowing vehicle access through gated roads, as well as providing better accommodations for disabled students and visitors, would make these people on campus feel more comfortable and welcome. Better signage would also promote efficiency for those traveling between classes. And oftentimes there are easily accessible routes or handicap accessible routes, but they're hard to find, so it kind of defeats the purpose. The article Mainstreaming Students with Disabilities Using Self-Efficacy states that because of the labels placed on students with disabilities, they must constantly prove their individual needs, strengths, and talents to people beyond the stigmas and stereotypes of the disability. In order to eliminate as many of the transportational barriers associated with these stigmas, more resources must be allocated to vehicle escorts and transportation accommodations for disabled people, such as wheelchair lifts on buses. This can be accomplished by contacting the Office of Student Accessibility. requesting these changes specifically. Advocating for more accessibility on campus would benefit more than just the mobility impaired individuals on campus. The burden of trying to find more easily accessible routes would be greatly reduced if more resources were allocated towards this issue. Although the current population of disabled students is small, it would open doors to those in the disabled community who might not have originally considered Pepperdine because of its lack of accessibility. Encouraging the education of disabled students would also promote equity among this already disadvantaged community. The average annual income, according to the article by Thomas Dailier in 2002, states that the average annual income for a non-disabled person compared to that of the average annual income of a disabled person compared to that of a non-disabled person is 61%. Although these differences can be partially attributed to the fact that less disabled people work, when disabled workers do work, they receive lower pay. The average wage of a disabled person, according to the same article, is 79% of that of a non-disabled person. People with disabilities are generally less educated, older, and work in less skilled occupations than those who are not disabled. Handicapped students are not the only people who would benefit from making campus more accessible. Increasing the resources would help students who are temporarily injured, who may be on crutches, as well as the visitors who arrive on campus, such as the family of a student who might be disabled, especially for those not familiar with the campus already. Increasing the inclusivity of people with disabilities may also reduce the stigma that these people face. In the CDC article titled Real Stories of People Living with Disabilities, a man, Jerry, explained his experience with stigma. At an Alabama courthouse, Jerry was waiting to renew his parking permit. He watched a worker walk down the line, asking people, "What do you need?" But when approaching Jerry in his wheelchair, he asked, "Who are you with?" This is just one example of the stigma that disabled people face on a daily basis. Increasing resources for better transportation accommodations is just one way to reduce this stigma. How can I advocate for the disabled community? Barriers and obstacles can inhibit the education of disabled people and the participation of them in social activities. Despite some advancements, there is still a long ways to go, such as the ADA Act. Poor signage, limited options, and lack of transportational options pose challenges to the disabled community. Increasing accessibility on campus would make life easier for not just the disabled community, but visitors, staff, and injured students as well. For these reasons, I ask you to advocate for increased campus-wide accessibility by contacting the Office of Student Accessibility. Requesting action for better signage, routes, and transportation options will greatly impact the lives of disabled people. Thank you.